One of my friends who is a girl of whom I forgot to ask and answer a question for at least months ago. So this video has its own past due date far too long ago. But just like the request from Davin's friend of whom I have to make a reaction video to their animation videos that I have still not made a video to yet. But this time, the girl asked me a question of, what would I do for a girl or someone of whom I'm in a relationship with if they're trans in the future? And for dealing with someone I would be in a relationship with in the future, there are many layers from situations to decision making and many areas from one to growth that I'll focus on. But I'm going to focus on one single sensitive part. I would call like the heart of all of this is the period cycle, the menstrual cycle. And unlike the other videos I make, I would kind of have to send a virtue signal here and a warning to that. I can't cover this part like a grid map of every precise detail, but I can say the general accuracies of what I would do as an operational thing in a blueprint in a relationship. For the cool aesthetic, I would call this Operation Relationship and Blueprint. Background knowledge. My thoughts about the period phase is that it is something that's painful for a lot of girls and trans people who do have periods. And, you know, I wish there could be something I could do to help them biologically, like somehow take some of that pain and feel it for myself so that I feel something less. But in the societal sense, I think then again, it's kind of like a heroic excuse for the boyfriend and girlfriend to be their hero, so to speak, and give them all the important care and foods. But nonetheless, I would find it important. In general, when my girlfriend or trans friend who can have periods tells me that they're having it, the first materials I prepare are kind of like an operational blueprint. So the first thing that I'd have are pads, obviously. Fun thing here is that during my sophomore year, as a side note, is that on certain days I'd always bring pads with me. So in case a girl was to come up to me and say she's on her period, I would hand her some quietly before she'd eventually go to the restroom. And I realized today that not many are really ready to ask someone like that in high school, but well, at least I had it ready, and that was good. But I'd have pads as a first resource in the relationship because it is the most important thing to have. Although I need to be smart whether they're small, medium, or heavy, so I can get the right one. The second thing I'd bring are heating pads and a stuffed teddy bear to hug as they wait out their thing as the days pass. I'd also bring hot teas and some gift of some sort, I don't know. But the third part I'd bring is the food. And instead of saying like vegetables or fruits, for example, I'd bring them something that they'd like a burrito. And this time, if it's donkey pouch burrito, I would replace the cheeses and take that out. But I told the vendor to add beans and meat, maybe the rest of the topping she'd like in vegetables. I know salsa is a real thing there. But instead, at home, if she would allow me, I know this might be a little bit of a disrespect to the burrito community, is that I would unravel that same burrito specifically for the period, but pack it into three different smaller whole grain tortillas and make it more consumable compared to eating it all at once since they're on their period. And three whole grain tortillas for fiber content, and then add the target specific vegetables that the vendor may not have, such as bell peppers and other fruits. And then I'll do something like this for other fast foods too. Remove the inflammatory parts while keeping that flavor, and then adding the necessary nutrients that would be adapted to any food that they'd like. It's not as healthy. And I'd also say whole grain bread specifically because of my growing experience content. Now, fast food doesn't replace healthy food, so I'd always cook something nice. And the last part that I also have to bring is obviously me because I'm doing all of this and in the shopping parts. Their parents too, if they have a special condition with their parents, so I can coordinate with them and get the right products that they would need that may not be mentioned in these videos. And what I would bring with me is obviously my own stuff, wet wipes and wipes to wipe the toilet. Now, I executes with all these resources across all four phases of the period. This would vary wildly because each trans person with a period is unique. Each girl with a period is also unique. So I might have to radically change this for an outlier girl who has a period. Or switch it out completely if they have allergens or other unique preferences specifically designed for their lifestyle. So, beginning this, the first cycle beginning with the menstrual phase. In this phase, I would really not expect too much in terms of emotional sensitivity, but I'd still try that same burrito tactic and the nutrients remain healthy and correct while still getting that same flavor that they like. And I'd also focus on soup, teas, and broths at that same time and remain generally in the diet that they're in. That is if their diet is healthy. If it's not, then I'll have to completely change it out even before that phase at all. But I'd say that their state right now would mostly be a little bit irritable, but neutral at best. Right now, I would say restroom use would start being a thing, so I'll be prepared for that and wipe down the toilet with that, get everything ready before they get into. Second phase here is when I say the sensitivity increases a little bit more. And in this phase, I might start getting the heating pads ready and get the stuffed animal ready, get the blankets and all ready, because this is a phallic phase. And this time, I push my approach meat centric here and that burrito tactic and adapt it to other foods again. Start increasing protein intake by the animal protein. And maybe start adding in whole grain intake to increase fiber usage. And in this state, I would say, with all the things, their mood would start fluctuating a little bit more. I would heighten out my own emotional sensitivity here too because something is bound to happen in the second phase. The third phase is the ovulatory phase. I think this is the peak point of sensitivity, so I would tone down my natural emotional intensity that I usually have as presented in these videos and real life. And I'd say any person around them would look immediately attractive, even a random fork on the floor, due to the amount of hormones released. So what I would focus on here is primarily the diet part. I'd go more of the floor style here. I would skip out on the meats and reduce that a little bit more and blend in fruit smoothies with fruits, diced vegetables, and eggs, but also make sure that they be pliable and consumable. Think of a steak dinner that has the carrots actually soft. But this is where I would start being a little bit more careful with how I'm going to do things. Going to cook things here because everyone's phase is different, but I really need to be heightened to their preferences in what's going to happen within the different phases. But in the final phase is where I call the luteal phase. I think this is the part where there'd be a little bit less and less interaction and more irritability in general for this part. I would still use a combination from the other phases in terms of food, but I would focus this time directly on fiber. The part I would say is whole grains and focus on fiber-rich foods such as bread. But mostly insoluble fiber is the type that I would choose in this phase because it helps with bowel movement. And I would call this the pre-pregnancy plan because, oh my gosh, that's a ridiculous name. But when I dropped for future operations as a boyfriend later on, if I somehow riz someone and then later on in a relationship I get them pregnant, I'll have to draft a new operation diet for when they're pregnant because that is going to go far longer than a simple 4 phase operation here. Because in the pregnancy, that's 9 months. That's easy to be an operation. That is a whole, well, something else entirely. But as I say, both of these operations are in the far, far future from now. And I know I'm taking this video as if I'm like 25 years old. And I'm taking this way far, but I'm just talking about it now because I can. But as I do say, every person's cycle is different. So someone who is a girl and has a completely different cycle would make fun of me for getting their way inaccurately. And someone whose cycle that I match with correctly might end up congratulating me or something. So everyone's is different. First phases can be angry in the other part, and some people might be happy in the other phases. I can't just go and say whatever to whatever. But this is the operational blueprints I would be using once I do end up finding someone who does have a period. But in the now, I'd be focusing on other side quests